only brought it up, even though you've got a couple of feet difference here, the flows coming out of there were small compared to the other sources, or the other source, I should say.
Well, you're aware that, well, first off, make it clear, when the water leaves Lake Albert, goes through a box culvert, through a channel, natural, or more or less natural channel, goes through a box culvert and over to pump.
Yes.
And have you looked at the DENR's measurements of the flows at that box culvert in the spring of 2009?
I don't believe I've ever seen them.
Would you dispute it if you were told that the measurements that the DENR measured 100 to 150 cubic feet per second coming through that box culvert in the spring of 2009?
In one measurement? No, I probably wouldn't argue that, since I don't have any data to either support or refute it.
And would you dispute it if I indicated to you that the flow from Lake Albert has continued throughout 2009 and continues to the present time from Lake Albert to Ponce?
Oh, I would expect that it would continue, yes.
And is Lake Ponce then currently discharging to the Big Sioux River?
I was told today, yes, it is.
And it has, Ponce has discharged to the Big Sioux River at various times throughout 2009, haven't you?
Yes, I think how to answer. Yes.
In fact, Lake Ponce was filled by May 19th of this year, wasn't it?
That is correct.
And you don't dispute that a significant portion of that fill came from Lake Albert, do you?
I can't answer that. I can't answer that because I do not have the numbers. I don't know. We'll say a portion of it came from Lake Albert, but I think the significant amount came because I understand that it came up very quickly in the spring, and that was water overtopping the Boswell gates, and that was a significant flow. I mean, it was large. But again, it is one of those, you sort of do an estimate of flow. There wasn't, I don't think there was any way to actually try to measure the flow.
So your testimony is that there was flow coming from Lake Albert, there was flow coming from Dry Lake, both into Ponce. Ponce is currently full and discharging to the Big Sioux River, but 2009 is not a rare hydrologic event, is it?
It's not a rare hydrologic event, but we have to go back to Exhibit 4. And let's look at the peaks on the river. And I just sort of drew a line in here the other day. In fact, I went out and, because I was curious to know what the peak flow was this spring on the Big Sioux, so I went to the U.S. Geological Survey.
Still answering my question about whether this was a rare hydrologic event?
I wouldn't say rare, but it was unusual. Again, we come back to these peak flows on the river. Peak flows on the river. We had one in the spring. It was about 1,700 cubic feet per second. It was flowing at Castle Lake. We had water that was overtopping. So if you do that, you can come back here, and here's a major event right here back in about 2001. So we would have significant water levels. If you take a look, there is the water level as a result of this event. But they occur I was figuring every 5 to 13, 14 years when one of these occurs. In the meantime, we have the declining water levels.
know, one thing about your report is it doesn't indicate how the water level, there are various control structures here, and there's this dry lake issue. Your report doesn't actually take and indicate how the lake levels would have changed if flood control 5A had been in effect as proposed in this proceeding. You don't superimpose those flows back on the conditions that existed. You just talk about the precipitation that occurred during the years.
Well, objection
Why
to
doesn't
their
the report?
question.
Well, I'm going to,
I haven't finished my question.
well, that's what I was going to say. I'll overrule the objection. Yes.
Why doesn't your report do that? And why aren't you explaining to the board how this flood control permit over the years would have changed the lake levels in the lake or lakes?
You're asking me hypothetically if we were to have had this in operation at some point in the past, how that would have affected the lake levels? Is that
I'm asking you why you didn't look at that.
I'm not. When you do this, you're not. Well, we did number one, but you're sort of asking. We would have expected, small rises. Again, we would have cut it off. So let's take 2009 for instance. I think that by the time the water level had gotten up, and I don't have a time frame here to a timeline to look at everything in here, but basically, I'm not even sure the gates would have been opened like this spring because the flows were such that by the time we would have started to open the gate, water was already coming over the top of Boswell, and in that case, we really didn't need that kind of water. So you're asking sort of a hypothetical question, and I don't have the numbers actually to look at like what flow is coming over the top of Boswell to answer that.
In order to answer that, you have to look at what flows are coming from Boswell, what flows are coming from Albert, what the stage is of the Big Sioux River, and have all those measurements for the various years in order to go back and superimpose what this change would be.
If you're asking whether there have to be some type of a management scheme in place, you would have to. You can't just go out and open the gates. You'd have to have some kind of a management approach to this, so that one would know when to do that. Like I say, this was a situation this year, and that we just didn't address it.